We're about to begin the tractate Eruvin, and we're getting close to the month of Nisan, the month of redemption, and this is the time that we believe in the ancient Egypt we are out of slavery, we reach the freedom. The rabbis tells us is no one free as someone who study Torah. In Ivrit, ein lecha ben chorim, ela mi sheosek betorah. So, what is Eruvin? Eruvin is a continuation of Shabbat, which means is a completion of what we study in Shabbat. It's a beautiful masechet that Tiferet Israel said it's called Eiruvin and not Eiruv, because it's a completion of many items that left open in a tractate Shabbat. One of the prayer that King David tells us in the book of Psalms is Tfilah le'ani ki ya'atof. There's another prayer in the book of Psalms that use the word ani, literally meaning poor, is Gal enai ayin nun yud ve'abita niflaot mitoratecha. Open my eyes and I'll see the beauty of your Torah. So you see both the word einai or ani, einai meaning my eyes, ani meaning poor. The key point the rabbi tells us in many sources that tractate Eruvin is one of the three tractate that appear a hard tractate. Ain is Eruvin, Nun is Nida, the tractate that dealing with law of Nida, and Yud is Yevamot, Levirate marriages. So you are expert in math, so you know that some students when they start study math, they get cold feet because they're afraid who knows what's going to happen. You are officer in the special forces, so you know that when they start training, some afraid that who knows what's going to happen. And later you learn over life that it's not the end of the world, quite the contrary. Usually it's a pleasure, it's a joy. Tfilah le'ani, someone who's ani, who's like a poor. Some rabbis said it's like way of thinking. So we pray together that Hashem open our eyes and eye, and we see the beauty of this tractate, because again, this is a beautiful learning of tractate. It's appear very difficult for us to overcome, but you will see at the end of this journey that it's really great pleasure, more than just fulfilling the mitzvah of study Torah. Before we begin, there are several deep thank you. I want to thank Hashem first and foremost for reaching this point in my life that I'm teaching many people Torah, and especially this tractate. I want to thank my parents, especially my father. My father, Rav Chaim Naftali Weisblum. He was a student in Ponevezh Yeshiva, and then he became a Rosh Yeshiva in Sdei Yaakov and a rabbi of the Moshav, and then he became the rabbi of the neighborhood called Neve Sha'anan in Haifa. He was, in many ways still is, even he retired, the rabbi there for 44 years in the Beit HaKnesset HaGadol Rambam, that's the name of his synagogue, his shul. And he was teaching tractate Eruvin about 4 decades. Furthermore, he was the one who in charge for the Eruvin in Haifa, in north part of Israel, on behalf of the chief rabbinate. Which means my father, God bless him, brought upon myself, my other brothers, the love and the beauty of the idea of Eruv and Eruvin. And we are here in Annapolis, Maryland, try together with the Rav Heinemann of Agudat Israel in Baltimore and several very hard-working volunteers here to make Eruv here as well. So I want to thank all of those people, my parents that brought me to this point, the people in the community that strive to make Eruv here. Last very deep thank you is to Rav Teichter. Who is Rav Teichter? In order to study Eruvin, when I study with my Chavruta Rav Shub in the Ner Israel Yeshiva, we use the special book. It's called Hamaor HaMevoar, and this book was made by the Meorot Daf Yomi. Is a special company in Israel that explain the Daf Yomi, especially in this tractate, with pictures. I contact Rav Teichter, and he wrote me a beautiful letter. Allow us to study, to use it, to show pictures from this book, Hamaor HaMevoar, in order for people who want to study this tractate to understand it better. Again, I'm using their book, Meorot Daf Yomi, with the permission for Rav Teichter, and I want to thank him very much. With that in mind, what is the abbreviation, the synopsis of the first page? The first page is based on a code, Shulchan Aruch Shin Mem Hei. The code tells us something that I'm sure that those who attend Tractate Shabbat remember. We have 4 different domains, Arba Reshuyot. We have Reshut Hayachid, the private domain, Reshut Harabim, remember, Karmelit and Mekom Ptur. So this is basically this tractate dealing, but in addition they're dealing also with Tchum Shabbat. Remember we talked several times about the 2000 amount Shabbat. That's in addition. What does that mean? In those days, the way that the houses were built was very much houses with a alleyway. Let's start using this so you see what we're talking about. Dave, you can zoom in with the camera. So in those days, that's the way the building was built, and it was 2 types of mevoot. What does that mean, mevoot? Mevoot, one, it's the alleyway that has a closed back. So in other words, it's only one way you can get out. And the second one, it's some alleyway that this part was open. So you can walk from this road, Reshut Harabim, this road, to this alleyway to the other area. This one, it's called Mavoi Satum. Mavoi Satum meaning it's closed. If you look carefully, it's closed, this area. So this is open, and this side is open, but this side is closed. It's Satum. Okay? Then you have Mavoi Mefulash. Mavoi Mefulash meaning something that this part is fully open. Now, since it's this entrance is open to public domain, that's we under the idea that it's called a mavoi. Now, according to the Torah, mavoi is considering Reshut Hayachid, is a private domain, which means that you can go ahead and carry from the house to the mavoi. Again, I want to show it again to make sure that it's clear. From the Torah, you're allowed to go and carry from the house to this mavoi, to this alleyway. The rabbis said that that's not sufficient. They need to have either lechi, which means it's a beam that you put on the right side. Does everyone see it? On the right side? Or you have to put korah, which is a beam that connected between the two. Why? Remember this word heker, to show that this is the entrance. Okay? Now, the original idea of carrying, it starts with the, if you remember the story in the tabernacle, later in the Beit HaMikdash, the idea of not carrying because people brought the contribution. And Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses said, V'amlacha ita dayam, they have enough, and it was a prohibition between carrying from Machane Israel, from the camp of Israel, to Machane Leviya. Machane Israel was a private domain, Reshut HaYachid. The Levite, it was Reshut HaRabim. So again, what we have so far, it's Halacha LeMoshe Misinai, Halacha that we receive a tradition from Moses on Sinai, that we cannot go in a public domain in Reshut HaRabim more than 4 amot, 4 cubits. Now, this mavoi, this alleyway, it has to have 16 amah. Amah is the size of, what do you say amah?
Is about 18 inches.
18 inches. So it has to be 16 by 18 inches.
How many amot?
It's for 3 different
right, so the height it has to be...
Its height will go soon, but
okay.
That's this part.
So the opening has to be how many amot?
16.
16 amot.
Minimum.
Which is 24 feet.
24 feet. Mm-hmm. So now, Rashi said, I'm just giving you the abbreviation so you know what we got to study. Mm-hmm. Rashi said that Stratya, this is something we study in the Tractate Shabbat. It's the place that you have the market. So in Stratya, people bring their merchandise out, in and out. So as long as it's open, it's a public domain. The minutes that Stratya have 3 mechitzot, 3 different partitions, that it changed to a private domain from the Torah, Midoraita. Now, this is the crucial part that please pay full attention. The rabbi said that you have to make heiker. Heiker meaning you need to make sure that people differentiate between public domain to private domain, between the alleyway and the public domain. How you do that? Remember, we say that this is a private domain by the biblical term, but not by the rabbinic term. The rabbi said that you have to do heiker. Remember this word. Heiker meaning you have to recognize that. And the way to recognize, you have to do either lechi or korah. Okay? Lechi is like the beam that people recognize it's something different here. And korah, it's much clearer in that sense that you see it running between the two, make it like one domain. The fear is that a person can take, if you don't have this, for example, a person can take from here to public domain and he will violate Isur Hotza'ah Deoraita, a prohibition against carrying in the Torah that we studied a lot earlier. So in that sense, the minutes you have either the Korah or the Lechi, now you have a Heker. Okay, now this part make it which called Tzurat HaPetach. The Tosfot tells us in page Kavbet Amud Aleph 22a that Tzurat HaPetach changed the whole status of the entrance. That Tzurat HaPetach. So the Meiri explained to us what's involved here. What's involved here is when you have this Eruv, for example, Eruvei Chatzerot, all the neighbors participated before Shabbat. Let's say they take from Gil and from David and from the other David and from Adam and from everyone. They pick up a piece of food, let's say cake, fish, whatever it is, some type of food. And therefore, when they're collecting all the food and put it in one domain, it means that all the people who live in that development are basically became Reshut Achat, one domain altogether. Now, if you have Mavoi Satum, if you have this type of Mavoi that it's Satum, you see the Satum because it's black at the very end. So all the neighbors who live here can do Eruvei Chatzerot. Each of them bring a piece of bread and then, or piece of food, and then they participate together. Okay? Now, Shitufei Mevo'ot, meaning all the people who live in different part of this development use that Eruv, and the one who made this takana was King Solomon and his court. And just in conclusion, before we start the Mishnah, the Zohar tells us in Parashat Ki Teitzeh, Raya Mehemna, he said that at the end of the days, Mashiach will come. It will be, the text tells us it will be ani verochev al hamor. Ani literally meaning poor, and riding a donkey. So the Tikkunei Zohar tells us that chamor, it's from the Hebrew idea of chomriyut, meaning materialism. So it means ani, it's usually referring to Talmid Chacham, to a Torah scholar, which means that he is striving all the times to overcome challenges. But here we're talking about feeling. The more you learn, the more you realize that you need to learn more and more. So it's a feeling of indigent, of poverty, because you discover how much you don't know. I remember when I got my master's, the first one, the second one, the PhD and all of that, I remember each and every time I felt, oh, I'm so far from learning. That's part of a ani. Ben rochev al hamor, it means that someone who overcome the materialism. Why? Because what happened is, when you encounter challenges, you're very easy to give up for Yetzer Hara, or for you have a business deal, you have other things to do, and why should I bother with this? But if you ride the chomriyut, if you overcome the materialistic needs, then you're really reaching the Mashiach's time, the end of the day's time, the time that we fulfill the prophecy of Amos, that lo ra'av lalechem, not it will be a famine in the land, not for bread and not for thirst for water, but only to hear the word of God. And that's my blessing to all of those who attend this class and people who are watching us, that may we reach and merit to that time that we will be able to have the greatest joy in life, to understand Torah, to learn Torah, and to be able to spread the word of Torah to the world. Amen.
Amen.
מבוי שהוא גבוה למעלה מ-20 אמה ימעט. The Mishnah tells us that if it's an alleyway, it's a small alleyway, that it's enclosed on 3 sides, which means they have 3 sides, 1, 2, 3, and they have a courtyard opening with a 3 side. Now they said here yema'et, so soon you see what it means yema'et, but in general he should put this one a little lower. In a moment I'll show you the other pictures, just give you the foundation first. Rabbi Yehuda Omer eino tzarich. Rabbi Yehuda said you don't need to reduce the heights of the Korah. You don't need to diminish it, because he said this beam, it's okay even it's above 20 amma. Even it's above 20 amma. So you don't need to reduce it. V'harachav me-10 amot. Now we're going to Rachav 10 amot. So here I'm going to show you the situation. You see, they said here, first let's see the word yama'et. What does that mean, yama'et? So we go by Rashi. Rashi tells us that yama'et meaning when you have this beam from one side to another, so you should reduce it from the heights. If it's a 10 amma, you see the 10 amma distance? David, everyone see it on the camera? Okay, so if it's a 10 amma, you see the way that Rashi said, tzarich lin'ot zkanim, you need to put these small pillars, lema'et rochav knisata, to reduce the entrance. Anybody knows why you need to do it? The idea is that you get a feeling that it's really a private domain.
Mm-hmm.
If you walk in the main road and you look at this, you notice that it's a private domain, right? ולעמידה על 10 או על פחות. You have to make it in a 10 אמות. What is a 10 אמות? What's the size?
About 15 feet.
15 feet or less.
Right.
So by doing this, you're basically reducing the size. Okay? Then they said, ואם יש לו צורת הפתח, צורת הפתח, everyone see the picture? צורת הפתח, it's 1, 2, 3, which means it's a form of a doorway. It's like you enter another domain, you enter a doorway. So אף על פי שהוא רחב מ10 אמות, even, you remember what Rashi said, that you need to make it smaller? But this צורת הפתח, it's bigger than the 10 amot. You see the size of this one? Mm-hmm. It's larger. So he said, the Mishnah said, Ein tzarich lema'et. You do not need to diminish it, right? Because it's an entrance rather than a branch. Even it's very wide. So Rashi said, Lechi mikan, velechi mikan, vekora achat al gabehem. You see one lechi, one beam, another beam, and that the top on in between, so that make it a form of a doorway. Remember this term, tzurat hapetach. So that's basically the Mishnah. Now, we go to the Gemara. The Gemara said, Tnan hatam, סוכה שהיא גבוהה למעלה מ-20 אמה, פסולה ורבי יהודה מכשיר. It's a very famous Mishnah in Tractate Sukkah, which we study, if you remember, when we study Mishnayot, that if you have a sukkah that it looks like not a temporary dwelling, one of the things that Hashem asks us is to leave our permanent home and go to temporary dwellings for a period of a week, or festival of Sukkot. So if you're building it in a very, very high, it appears like you're building something for a different purpose, for something that is a permanent. So they said if it's above the 20 cubits high, it's unfit. It's not considering sukkah. And Rabbi Yehuda, it deems it fit. Rabbi Yehuda said it's fine. So now you see how we juxtapose the two halacha. מה ישנה גבי סוכה דתנא פסולה וגבי מבוי תנא תקנתא. You remember what we said in a sukkah, if the heights it's above the 20 cubit height, it's make the sukkah invalid, right? It's unfit. And what we said about mavoi? We said about mavoi the entrance. Remember what we said about the mavoi? That if it's in that size, we make the rectification that one must diminish the height of the crow's beam to make it not so high. You reduce it. What's the difference? So the Gemara tells us, Sukkah deoraita tani psula. Sukkah is obligation from the Torah. So because it's obligation from the Torah, is a biblical precept, therefore we say that it's invalid. However, mavoi derabanan tani takanta. You remember what we said? We said that by the Torah law, this area, it's considering a private domain. And you have this blockage at the end, and that's make it a private domain. The rabbi said that you have to have a heker, you have to recognize that is a private domain, and the rabbi said you have to make tzurat hapetach look like an entryway, right? So since this idea is rabbinic, it's not a biblical idea, it's rabbinic, therefore you cannot compare the rabbinic requirement to a biblical precept. Everyone understand it? Another explanation, ve'ibait eima, another option, deoraita nami tani takaneta. The truth of the matter, if you want to go by the Torah, so the Ran follow Rashi, and he tells us that yes, if you want to make the sukkah valid, guess what you have to do? You have to reduce the heights from 20 to make it lower, and in that sense you can make the sukkah valid and fit. Ela, sukkah d'nfishin milei, pasek v'tane psula. But in regard to sukkah, the matter are numerous. There are so many halachot involved with sukkah. The whole idea of the schach, okay, the idea that they have to have 3 walls, they have to have more than 10 handbreadth, they have to have more shed than the sun. If you have sun more than the shed, is invalid. So therefore they use the term unfit in that category. Mavoi de la nefishe milte. However, when it's come to alleyway, it's not so many. The Mishnah teaches Tanita Kanta, the method of rectification. In other words, when you set up the heights and you diminish it, you can carry in an alleyway. אמר רב יהודה אמר רב, חכמים לא למדוה אלא מפתחו של היכל, ורב יהודה לא למדה אלא מפתחו של אולם. We have a tabernacle when the Jewish people wander in the desert. Then we have a permanent Beit HaMikdash, a permanent temple. So Rav Yehuda tells us, in the name of the Rav, that the sages in our Mishnah, when they make invalid if he build above the 20 amot, 20 cubits, they learn it from the entrance of the sanctuary, which means the entrance of the holy Beit HaMikdash, the holy temple, the area before the Holy of Holies. That area, if you look at those pictures of Beit HaMikdash, east to west, I wish to have some pictures. So basically they have 3 steps. You have the Holy of Holies, that you have the Aron, the Ark, and the Kruvim. Then you have the sanctuary. You have the golden altar, you have the table, you have the menorah. And then you have the big, big hall, that it's the hall before you enter the sanctuary. So, in the tabernacle, however, it was only 2 parts. It was the Holy of Holies, and it was the place that is called a tent of meeting. So, therefore, he said, they learn that this Korah, this entrance, when he put it at that entrance, and Rabbi Yehuda learned it from the entrance hall leading to the sanctuary. Ditnan. We have the source in Tractate Midot, Mishnah chapter 4, the first one. Pitcho shel echal, the doorway of the sanctuary, gavho 40 ama, verochbo 20 ama, is 20 cubits high and 10 cubits wide. So, therefore, the sages that learn from the entrance of the sanctuary, they learn that it's 20 amma. And the Rabbi Yehuda that learned from the entrance of the hallway, he learned that it's even higher than that. And Rav explained it, and he said, Ushnehem, shnehem meaning both of them, the sages and Rabbi Yehuda, Mikra echad darshu, they learn from one pasuk, from one sentence. The Torah said in the book of Vayikra, Leviticus chapter 3, pasuk bet, sentence 2, Ushchato petach oel moed. The Torah said, and I quote the pasuk, and he shall lay his hand upon the head of the offering, and slaughter it at the doorway of the tent of meeting. And Aaron's son, the priest, shall sprinkle the blood on the altar round about. So what we learn from that? Here is the disputation. De Rabbanan Savrei, the sages hold, Kdushat Heichal Elechud, v'kedushat ulam lechud, which means that there are two different levels of sanctity. You have the sanctuary and you have the entrance hall. So it's a different gradation of sanctity. So the sanctuary is the same as the tent of meeting in a desert, but the entrance hall, it's less, and therefore all the type of labors that the Kohanim need to perform in a sanctuary, if they made it in an entrance hall, it makes that labor invalid, unfit, because it has to be in a sanctuary. וכי כתיב פתח אוהל מועד, and when the text said the doorways of the tent of meeting, that's apply ההיכל כתיב, that's apply specifically at the sanctuary. So meaning when they said the entrance of the tent of meeting, it said unequivocally to the sanctuary and not to the entrance hall. And the term petach, meaning entrance, has to be the heights of 20 cubits and not apply to the entrance hall. That's the sages. ורבי יהודה סבר, and Rabbi Yehuda hold, היכל ואולם קדושה אחתי. He hold that it's all holy, it's all have a sanctity, and therefore sanctuary and the entrance hall are one, and therefore any type of labor that the priest, the Kohanim, need to perform in the sanctuary, they can do it in the entrance hall as well, and because it's all under the category of a tent of meeting. וכי כתיב פתח אוהל מועד, because the Torah used the term the doorway of the tent of meeting, אטרוויו הוא דכתיב, that's referred to both of them, the sanctuary and the entrance hall. So therefore, even some entrance that made highest than 20 cubits, it's still considering in that line a petach, an entrance as well. So you see, by that we try to juxtapose the entrance here to the entrance of the sanctuary. Another view, ve'ibaitema, another suggestion, לרבי יהודה נמי קדושת אולם לחוד וקדושת אחד לחוד. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's still difference between the sanctity of the entrance hall and the sanctity of the sanctuary. But here when you talk about the alleyway, היינו תמה דרבי יהודה דכתיב אל פתח אולם הבית, because they said clearly in the Torah the doorway of the entrance of the house. So the doorways of the entrance of the house, it's not in the Torah, it's the book of Ezekiel, chapter 40. So it means that here they explain to us, the Mefarshim, the Ritva and others, that that's considering an entrance. So therefore, even a doorway that the entrance hall is referred to in the Torah as a doorway is the same as the same dimension, the same comparable dimension. So, V'Rabanan, hava ktiv, if it was written El Petach Ulam Kid'amart, השתא דכתיב אל פתח אולם הבית, הבית פתוח לאולם. According to the sages, what it's written, the doorways of the entrance wall, when Ezekiel said it, so we understand that it applied that the doorway of the entrance wall of the house. That's different to the house open to the entrance wall, which means it applied to the sanctuary. So what we understand, the definition of the doorways is the dimension of the doorways of the sanctuary. So we try to compare the two. And what it's written there, the doorway of the tent of meeting, it's applied to the tabernacle at the time that they are in the wilderness. Ashkechal Mishkan de'ikre Mikdash, u'Mikdash de'ikre Mishkan. We find a tabernacle that it's called temple, and the temple is called tabernacle. So we can derive and juxtapose and compare one halacha to another. It means that it's just interchangeable. If you don't follow that way, if you follow by what Rav Yehuda, name of Shmuel, said, that if one bring a peace offering that he slaughtered in a temple prior to the opening of the doors of the sanctuary, so what happened is make it disqualify psulim. Shene'emar, because it's written, Ushchato petach oel moed, that you need to slaughter at the doorway of the tent of meeting. So, bizman sheptuchim velo bizman she'nem neulim. That's applied that when the tent of meeting are open, and not when they are closed. So, when they are closed, Rashi said in Zvachim 61 that that applies specifically to peace offering and not to other offering. But according to the Tosfot there, you derive from the peace offering to all the other offering. And the Rambam elaborate in the Maaseh Korbanot, which we'll discuss later in the practical halacha. So what it's written there, it's isn't written in regard to the tabernacle. Ella, you have to understand that the purpose of the learning, juxtaposing the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, the tabernacle, to the sanctuary, Ashkechan Mikdash de'ikre Mishkan, Mishkan de'ikre Mikdash, which means that there is interchangeable between the temple and the tabernacle, and tabernacle called temple. It's go both, because that was a temporary, that was permanent, etc. Bishlama Mikdash de'ikre Mishkan. We understand that the temple sometimes is called tabernacle, because they said in Leviticus 26, V'natati et mishkani betokechem, and I should dwell, I should set my sanctuary among you. So that's applied to a permanent sanctuary, which is the Beit HaMikdash, the temple. So that's part of telling the Jewish people the envision that they're going to settle in the Holy Land. Ela mishkan de'ikra mikdash menalan. But the fact that tabernacle is called temple, where we derive it, ileima. May we, in all of that we do in order to explain the whole idea of mavoy, of the entrance. Ileima, if you learn it, midechtiv, because it's written about the sons of Levi. You know, Levi have sons. So it's 3 sons, one of them was named Kehat. So the Torah said, in the book of Numbers, chapter 10, they said, V'nas'u ha-kehatim nosei ha-mikdash, v'ekimu et ha-mikdash mishkan ad bo'am. The Kehatim, the bearers of the temple, because they carry it, set forward that they may set up the tabernacle before they came. So it means that the tabernacle, it's called in that sense Mikdash, a sanctuary, like a temple. We just turned the page to be Hahu be'aron ktiv. Is that talking about the ark? Because when you use the word Mikdash, a temple, it's not the tabernacle, but it's the Ark of Covenant, Aron HaBrit. So that was the Kehatim carry, and that's called Mikdash, a sanctuary, because that was the one who's the most sanctified, more than all the other utensils that use in the temporary tabernacle. So how do we know that the entire temporary tabernacle, the one that they carry in the desert, it's also called Mikdash, it's also called sanctuary? Ela mehacha, we learn from the Exodus 25, they said, Ve'asu li Mikdash, ve'shachanti betocham. The Torah tells us in Parashat Truma, and let them make me a temple, a Mikdash, and I dwell, my divine providence will dwell upon them. So that's reference to tabernacle. So you see the importance when God commanded to build the tabernacle, that it's called a sanctuary, a temple, the way that we said. So now the Gemara asks, Bein leRabbanan, Bein leRabbi Yehuda, regardless if according to opinion of the rabbis or according to opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, leilfu mipetach sha'ar chatzer. Why we don't learn from the book of Bamidbar, Numbers, chapter 4? The Torah tells us that the courtyard has a entrance that was different from the one in the sanctuary, Dichtiv, because they said, Orech, in the book of Shmot in Exodus 27, they said, Orech chatzer me'a ba'ama, verochav 50 ב-50, vekoma 5 amot. They said that the size, the length of the courtyard shall be 100 cubits, and the breadth 50 everywhere, and the heights for 5 cubits. And it's written, soon I'm going to show you a picture, וכתיב ו15 אמה קלעים לכתף. And they said, and for the other side of the court gate, on his hand and on that hand were hanging of 15 cubits. And the Torah said the pillars were 3 and the socket 3. So if you hang on the both side of the gate, it's cover 30 of the courtyard, total of 50 cubits. Let me share with you the picture from Meorot Daf Yomi. Here is the tabernacle. Does everyone see the picture? Can you look over there? See? Okay. So in the picture, you see here, this is the tabernacle. It's in a desert, and they're moving the tabernacle from one location to another. If you look at this is the courtyard of the tabernacle, and this is the entrance. And soon we're going to juxtapose to our discussion with Mavoi. So you see here, this is 15 amma, this is 15 amma, and this is 20 amma. So this is the size of the open entrance to the Mishkan. And so that's called Petach Echatzer. Rashi said that this is the entrance of the yard because it's 20 amot here. Now, then they said, and the Rochav, and this side, you see here, this part is 15 amot, and this part is 5 amot, this size. So that is the entrance of the tabernacle. So they said here, מה להלן 5 ברוחב 20, אף כאן 5 ברוחב 20. The same way, just as there, regard to the tabernacle, the entrance is 5 cubits high by 20 cubits wide, and it's considered a doorway. So here too, with regard to halachot of Eruvin, the entrance has to be 5 cubits high by 20 cubits wide, and should considered a doorway. So now we have a problem, because here you see that the size of the mavoi, it's regardless to Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbanan, even Rabbi Yehuda allow mavoi in a size of 10 amot. So basically here is a difference in the size of the width and heights. So the Gemara explained and said, Petach sha'ar chatzer ikre, petach stama lo ikre. Wait a second. Cannot prove from that sense. Why? So if you talk about the entrance is called a doorway of the gate of the courtyard, that's fine, but it's not called a doorway of the unmodified, which means the dimensions of the doorways we mentioned without any type of qualification cannot be derived from a doorway. Another explanation, v'bai tema, ki ktiv kla'im 15 ama la katef, when the Torah used in the Exodus 38, they use the term, the hanging on one side of the gate shall be 15 cubits. What is applied to? Begovhau dichtiv, which means that this speak about the heights of the hanging, the width of the hanging. It's not specified in the Torah. So the width of the doorway and the gate it's unknown. We don't know how much. That's the second explanation of Rashi, which means that regardless if it's the east part of the courtyard or the others, it was 15 amot, but the width, it's not clear, so it can be either 10 or less. So let's see again the pictures to make it clear. So you have here the temporary tabernacle, and you have here the size. So you see here it's 15 amot, and you see here 15 amot, and you see in between the 20. Okay? Now, when we talk about the width, so this is the 5 amot, and this is the 15 amot. So this is the heights, and this is the widths, and that's so when we talk about heights and we try to compare, if you see here at the temporary tabernacle, it's it talk about 15 govha. Is that 15? The Gemara asks. Ve'aktiv ve'koma 5 amot. It's written that the edge, the heights is 5 cubits. So it said in a very clear way. It's lucidly said. So they said, "Ahu misfat mizbeach ulemala." So let me show you the picture. You see here the altar. David, everyone see it on the picture on the camera? Okay, thank you. So you see here, this is the altar. You see here the size they put on purpose, 15, 15, 15, 10, 5. You see the size that need to cut, 15, 10, and 5. So that's, when you talk about the heights of this part of the yard, it's applied to the edge of the altar and above this small part. So the truth is that they all together, the heights was 15, and what they said 5, it means that it's a 5 above from the altar, the external altar that was in the courtyard of the tabernacle, and his heights was 10. So that's what the Torah meant when they used the term a vekoma 5 amot, that the heights it's 5. It's applied to these 5. Does everyone see it? Okay. ורבי יהודה מפתחו של אולם גמר. And Rabbi Yehuda actually derived the unattribute opinion of the Braita. He learned it from where? He derived it from the doorways of the entrance of the hall. והתנן והרחב מ10 אמות ימעט ולא פלג רבי יהודה. But what we said in the Mishnah, that when you have the entrance of the alleyway is wider than 10 cubits, one man diminished it with width. And Rabbi Yehuda did not dispute that ruling. Remember what we said? Let me show again the picture. Dave, does everyone see it? Okay. What we said in the Mishnah, that if the width is 15, and you need to make it 10 or less, so you need to make these pillars to make it smaller, right? So the size of the entrance, it's smaller, and that's make it clear that it's a private domain. Okay? So they said, רבי יהודה אומר אינו צריך, so this, ולא פליג רבי יהודה, אמר אביי, אמר אביי פליג בברייתא. Rabbi Yehuda disagree with an attribute opinion of the Braita. The Tanya, as we learn in the Braita. When you talk about the entrance of the alleyway, והרחב מ10 אמות ימעט, רבי יהודה אומר אינו צריך למעט. The Braita we said that if we have the same as the Mishnah, if it's above than 10 amot, you should make it smaller. You should put these pillars and make it smaller. Rabbi Yehuda said you don't need to do it. Right? It's enough you have this entrance, you don't need to make it smaller. So, veliflog b'matnitim. So if so let him disagree in the Mishnah. So they said, palig begovha vehu adin lerochba. The Tana in Mishnah, he speaks about the heights, but is not speaking about the length in between. והכתי רבי יהודה מפתחו של אולם גמר. והכתי רבי יהודה מפתחו של אולם גמר. This is the tabernacle, we know, but it's the same in that sense in the permanent temple. And the entrance of the entrance hall in the Beit HaMikdash, the dimension, he learned from that. And he learned the size from that. So it's still possible to have his opinion from the doorway of the entrance hall. והתניא, מבוי שהוא גבוה מ-20 אמה ימעט. You see here, if you have mavoi, if you have an alleyway, that you see the heights, it's above 20 amot, so what we said, you should make it below, you should reduce it. Unlike sukkah, you should reduce it to a lower. So if that's said, ורבי יהודה מכשיר עד 40 ו-50 אמה. Rabbi Yehuda said, no, you can, it dims to even 40 and 50 cubits. So, Vetani Bar Kapara ad 100. And Bar Kapara said, it's not just 20, you can go up to 100. So, Bishlama le Bar Kapara. So we understand by the way that Bar Kapara, it's a guzma, exaggerating. What is 100? 100, you make 100 as an entrance. You permit to carry in an alleyway, even it's across the high of such a level. אלא לרב יהודה, מהי גוזמה? But according to Rabbi Yehuda, what does that mean, guzma? That's exaggeration. So they said, בישלמה לרבי יהודה 40 גמר מפתחו שולם. So the Bach took out the word Rabbi Yehuda. He said, Bishlama, this is according, this is good, that we compare it to the entrance hall. Ela 50 menale. How either Rabbi Yehuda or we understand that it's even the 50 amot, so high that 50 cubits, so from where we derive it, or Rabbi Yehuda derive it. So what it looks like, Rabbi Yehuda is not have this idea of the dimensions of the entrance of the doorway from the entrance hall. Amar Rav Chizda hamatnita at itei lerav. That Mishnah misled Rav to misconstrue the whole idea. The Tanya, מבוי שהוא גבוה מ-20 אמה יותר מפתחו של היכל ימעט. Listen carefully. This is the mavoi. This is the mavoi entrance. If it's 20 amot, 20 high cubits, so now we said, okay, if that's the idea, if it's more than the higher than the doorway of the sanctuary, so since you compare it to the entrance of the holy sanctuary, so then you need to yema'et, you need to reduce the height. And therefore, hu savar midrabanan mipitcho shel echal gamri. He hold that they juxtapose our mavoi or Shabbat to the mavoi that you have in the sanctuary. And Rabbi Yehuda mipitcho shel ulam gamar. Rabbi Yehuda compare our mavoi to the entrance of the entrance hall in the Beit HaMikdash. So he said velohi. He says no. The sages learning it for comparing to what? To the entrance of the sanctuary. Rabbi Yehuda mipitchat dimlachim gamar. He learned it from the entrance of the king's entrance. What does that mean? If you read in the book of Esther, the book of Esther tells us about King Achashverosh, the chapter 5. ויהי ביום השלישי ותלבש אסתר מלכות ותעמוד, etc. So they said there that Esther entered the entrance place of King Achashverosh. So they tell us how the entrance was in that place in Shushan. Or they said in the book of Kings, the scripture refer in the book of Kings chapter 14, the first book of Kings, they talk about King Solomon. It's a huge place, right? That he built the first Beit HaMikdash, the first temple. So that one was huge, and the entrance is valid even it's a 50 cubits high. Now we compare to that one. We compare to King Ahasuerus, we compare to King Solomon, and now we compare our Mavoi by this opinion by Rabbi Yehuda to that entrance. V'Rabanan. So how the sages compare it? If they derive the opinion from the doorway of the sanctuary, libau dlatot kahechal, let them require doors in order to render the alleyway fit for one carry within it. So they learn it in comparing just as were the door of the sanctuary. Alamatnan, because we learn in the Mishnah, and soon, God willing, we're going to learn this Mishnah in page 11b, that you don't need doors, because the Mishnah said as follows: Hechsher mavoi, how you make the mavoi available for carrying. Beit Shammai omrim lechi, ubetel omrim lechi o korah. Again, let's go back to the picture. Here we talk about making this alleyway available. Beit Shammai said you have to put a lechi, you have to put a beam, and that not enough. You have to put also korah. You have to put that beam here, and by putting this one and that one, you make it clear that that's the entrance, and that make it available for people to carry. But according to Beit Hillel, it's either one, either lechi or korah. Either this one or that one make it available. You don't need both. So you see that Beit Shammai, it's more stringent, they require both of them. Beit Hillel, just one of them. Now, so they said, if you learn it in that way, so you see that you don't need doors. So why they don't learn it from the entrance of the sanctuary that you need to have doors? So the Gemara said, no, dlatot eichal tzniut be'alma u'de'avidan. The only idea that they made the doors at the sanctuary was only for the purpose of modesty. They want to make it a private. But it's not a specific purpose, it's no specific function. Rabbeinu Hananel said, the idea is that people who are outside should not see what's going on inside. They should not see the whole process of the preparation of offering and everything. So it's not because, the Meiri said, it's not because they want to block it. It's just because it's a privacy, that's the way that they prepare it. So therefore, even without those doors, it's still considering an entrance, it's still considering a petach, and so therefore, since we compare the sanctuary to our alleyway, so you see that Mavoi, our entrance, doesn't need to have doors. It's enough to have either by Beit Shammai lechi and korah, or by Beit Hillel either lechi or korah. So, in general term, just a small side note, Heichal, the sanctuary, was 10 amot, 10 hand cubit. The ulam, the entrance hall, was 20, and now we explain it. So the Gemara asks, Ela me'ata, if so, if the sages explained to us the opinion that the entrance of the sanctuary was what? Lo tehanelei tzurat hapetach. So the form of a doorway, the whole idea of two vertical posts on the two sides with a horizontal cross beam spanning a space between them should not be effective if the alleyway is more than 10 cubits wide. And the ha'echal tzurat hapetach havyalo, because the entrance of the sanctuary have this look of entrance, okay, because he has two sides of mezuzot and mashkof, and in between, ואפילו אחרי 10 אמות הוא דרוויח. But his, in between the sanctuary, they have a form of a 10 cubits wide, but no more than that. So that's, otherwise it's not considering an entrance. So if it was more than 10, so they have to make it, Tosfot said, the same as the entrance hall. that it was a size of the length 20 hand cubits. But since it's not considering an entrance, whatever it's less than a hand cubit, so therefore the Sfat Emet said that they have to make it as a 10. Alama. So what's the reason? So they said Tnan. What the reason we learn in the Mishnah? Im yesh lo tzurat hapetach אף על פי שרחב מ10 אמות אינו צריך למעט. Why we said in the Mishnah that if the entrance has a form of a doorway, even it's wider than 10 cubits, he doesn't need to diminish the width. So in other words, if, remember the Mishnah, if they have 10 amot wider, so that's enough and you don't need to diminish that. It's enough. So why you need to say it? So they explain and they said, Mide hutama ela lerav. This is the reason only according to the Rav, who hold that the sages derive their opinion from the doorway of the sanctuary. Hamatne la Rav Yuda lechia barav kamei derav. We didn't we teach the Mishnah according to Rav Yehuda lechia barav, before Rav, that what we say, that if you have the tzurat hapetach, you remember the tzurat hapetach, the way that it looks as entrance, even they have 10 hands cubit, eino tzarich lema'et, he doesn't need to make it smaller if they have 10 hands cubit. Okay? Ve'amar li, so Rav said to Rav Yuda, atnaye, you should learn the Mishnah differently. And now you listen carefully what he said. He said, no, you must diminish it. He holds that according to Rav, the form of the doorways, it's not allowed to carry wider than the sanctuary. So the question is from the doorway poses has no difficulty of his opinion, because he said that you have to make it smaller. So what you see here, that Rav hold according to Mishnah, the idea of tzurat hapetach, to make it an entrance, if it's wider than 10 hand cubits, the way that we found at the entrance of the sanctuary. Another question we have for the Rav, Ela me'ata, if so, we are at the top of page 3, לא תהנה לארמלתא, דאריך לארמלתא הביא לי, אפילו אחרי 20 אמה הוא דגבוה. So he said that if you producing a corning, which means crowning the entrance, you make the entrance with, in a sense, it's like a crown. So you basically the doorways of the entrance wall was in a size of 20 cubits high, and the wide 40 cubits high, and the 5 corners above it. So that's should not be effective in rendering an alleyway to carry within it if it's higher than 20 cubits. And they said, "Va'afilu acha 20 ama hu degavoa." The sanctuary has a cornice which is the 20 cubits high. And ditnan 5 המרתעות של מילה היו על גביו, זו למעלה מזו וזו למעלה מזו. We learn in the Mishnah over it where there is a 5 oak cornices, one protruding above others. So let's wrap it up with several halachot. First halacha is Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 363. Mavoi shehu gavoa me-20 ama. If you have a alleyway that is higher than 20 cubits, a cross beam spanning the entrance of an alleyway does not render the alleyway fit for carrying within the Shabbat if it's more than 20 cubits high above the ground. However, a side post render the alleyway fit for carrying within it. That's according to an attribute Mishnah. We learn also about Sukkah. That's Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 633. If the Sukkah has more than 20 cubits high, so it's unfit. So that's a famous Mishnah in Tractate Sukkah. Another halacha, we learn about the entrance hall. So I'm using here just for the sake of understanding the temporary, but the point is the petach ha'ochal. The doorway of the sanctuary in the temple was 20 cubit high and 10 cubit wide. That's at least this size, 10 cubit wide, while the doorway of the entrance wall was 40 cubit high and 20 cubit wide. That's the Rambam in Ilchot Beit HaMikdash, chapter 4. Now, another halacha we learn, it's the halacha of shlamim sheshchatan kodem ptichat daltot ha'echal. Is a peace offering that were slaughtered prior to the opening of the sanctuary door, so it's are disqualified. And the same is true if the animal was slaughtered after the doors were open in the sanctuary doors were temporarily closed. So that's the opinion of Shmuel, and it's the Rambam Ilchot Beit HaMikdash, chapter 5. We learn also the Amar Talaot Shebamikdash. This is the Rambam Ilchot Beit HaBchira, chapter 4. Over the doorway of the entrance hall of the temple building, there was 5 oak cornices, which is the protruding above the other, with a large layer of stone separating them, and each one was 2 cubits longer than one below it.